So what if we had a device that we could strap on and wear for 30 minutes that would improve our bone quality and density? It's an amazing idea, right? Well, I'm not the first person to think of this, and there is a new product coming to market that is getting quite a bit of buzz. It claims to do just that. This device is called Osteoboost. And now I have no affiliation with the device or the company, but I've been sent their website numerous times now with a request to review what's going on. So I want to review this with you today. I want to go through their site. I want to discuss what I can tell about the device, my thoughts on the design, the available research, and most importantly, the claims that are being made. Because I think there's some pretty bold claims that are very enticing. So I want to go through this with you. If you have a device that you're loving, though, for your bone health, will you do me a favor? Let me know what it is on YouTube. Leave a comment for us. I'd love to hear what people are finding to be most effective for improving their bone health. All right, so this new device is coming onto the market. And again, it's called Osteoboost. Now, as a member of an audience of people with likely osteoporosis and osteopenia, you have to recognize that you are within a group of about 50 million adults. That's a pretty big group. There are also no good answers in this group when it comes to the traditional medical model. That actually makes you a pretty target-rich audience for a device company or a supplement company. And you see that in the market, right? This is why we make all these videos, because there are so many devices, tools, programs, exercises, supplements that are aimed at people with osteoporosis because there's not a clear solution. If there was one clear way forward, we'd all do that thing. So when it comes to this device, the question is it worth it? Well, right now you can't even buy it. So we don't have to make that decision right now, but you can sign up to be on their wait list. So the question is this something that we want to pin our hopes on? There is enough information, I think, to make a decision around this. So what I'd love to do with you is I'd love to go through their website, talk about their claims, and talk about the research that they have listed there. And then we'll come back and we'll talk about the research that we were able to find in published areas, and I'll talk about the challenges there. But let's take a peek at their website. All right, so what you can see here is the website for the company called Bone Health Technologies, and you can see that their primary thing is the Osteoboost. Now they make a claim here right across the top that says FDA grants clearance for breakthrough medical technology Osteoboost. Cool, so it sounds great. And then some usual marketing statements here. Strengthen your bones safely and without medication. Great, we all want to do that. You can actually see the device here on these individuals, or at least the device as it's represented here. So they do a great job of talking about the problem, and we've talked about these statistics, so we don't need to revisit this. Here's what the device probably looks like at this point in time. So you can see it's a belt. It's got a little, looks like a battery pack on the back. I mean, I think this is the device that does what is essentially going to be vibration. They talk about this thing that is a Osteoboost vibrating belt and applies gentle mechanical stimulation. They cite some research here. So they say, based on NASA research, leveraging 15 years of published research. And I'll actually show you this study in a little bit. We'll go through who was the author and the details of that study. And then they say clinical research, Osteoboost has been studied in multiple NIH-funded clinical trials, which sounds great. I will discuss the challenges there. We have two studies to talk about, and they are both NIH-funded clinical trials. So we will take a look at that. And then they make the statement here that this is 30-minute treatment per day while doing chores or walking the dog. It's easy to fit into your lifestyle. That seems real. And then they are, again, sort of hitting the pain points here, which is that you have a higher risk of fracture if you have osteopenia, osteoporosis. And this is a nice way to look at the trajectory of bone density for, this is specifically for American women, but probably true for humans in general. Men are just going to have a slower decline. Now, this is where things get a little bit more interesting. So they talk about the Osteoboost difference, and we're going to talk about this study looking at NTX. So in a recently published study, Osteoboost induces an acute reduction in bone loss activity as measured by NTX. So NTX is very similar to the CTX biomarker that we talk a lot about. CTX is the blood marker. NTX is the urine marker. So we'll talk about this study. Great early intervention. I agree with that. High compliance. So in their studies, they found that people didn't mind wearing this device. So that's a good sign. And then they talk about this pivotal trial results showed dramatic reduction in the loss of vertebral bone strength as measured by CT. So that's cool. And we'll talk about that study, and we'll talk about sort of the pluses and minuses of CT, because CT is very, very sensitive, but you cannot extrapolate that data and say what would happen by DEXA. So you have to be careful there. Again, high compliance rate, because this thing apparently is pretty easy to wear, 30 minutes a day, that's fine. They talk about how to wear it. So you've got this device on, you hit the power button, the thing does the thing. So that's fine. And they talk about their research here. This is the study. So we've pulled this up. We'll talk about this study. They got a little video, and they talk about their team. Now, this is one of the things that's really, I think, is very impressive about this company, is that you have a CEO who has been on some big companies, who has sold them to bigger companies. You have a robust team of a CMO, some engineering individuals, marketing, regulatory, clinical operations, and then look at these board members. So you've got, you have a bunch of doctors, MBAs, you've got a number of individuals who are advising, and then you have your advisors and investigators. We've got endocrinologists from Stanford and Harvard, UCSF. So a whole lot of people behind this device, and you can see that these investors, there's a bunch of investors. This is a multi-million, tens of million, if not hundreds of $1 million company. So, okay, it sounds really cool, right? And then you can reach out to them, and they are in, as you would imagine, Silicon Valley. So that's kind of cool. Now, what's frustrating about this is when you go to look at the research, this is all you get. They don't cite their own studies, which is definitely a pet peeve of mine. So it doesn't mean we can't find them. I just wish they would show them to me. Team, we've kind of already talked about. So that's the team there. And then in the news, they have some of the news articles that have been published about it. So they talk about their funding. They talk about, the problem. There's a whole bunch of articles in here. So the biggest challenge I see here is that they don't cite or show statistics other than the couple that they did from their own studies. And that's a concerning for me as somebody who's being asked to recommend this product, not by this company, but by individuals who are looking at this. So here's how you get on the notification list if you decide that you want to do that. So let's go back and look at some of these studies. Okay, so before we view the studies, I want to talk a little bit about the claims that they're making here, because they're talking about osteopenia rather than osteoporosis. And in fact, I'll talk a little bit about this later, but the CEO makes a really big deal that there is no treatment, there's no FDA-approved treatment for osteopenia, and that one of their goals is really primarily to address people with osteopenia, not osteoporosis. This is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine too, because I've talked about this in other videos, that if you follow the natural T-score trajectory, particularly for Caucasian and Asian women, it is absolutely normal to develop osteopenia. So to some extent, you can make a claim that the whole T-score principle is flawed, because you're using a biomarker, an imaging biomarker, but using a biomarker that is going to become positive for everybody if they live long enough, and then telling them that they need treatment, whether it be a drug or this Osteoboost or whatever. So I take a little bit of an issue with the idea that everybody with osteopenia needs treatment. That's not true. Now, I understand from a business perspective, the goal of treating people with osteopenia rather than osteoporosis is because there are 50 million people with osteopenia. There are only 10 million people around that with osteoporosis. So you have a 5x bigger audience. So I get that. That makes sense. But remember that osteopenia is really only an issue if your trajectory is dramatic, if you're going down quickly. So meaning, like, I have osteopenia. I've had it since I was in my 20s, but my T-score has been stable. Although I hope to, of all the things that I'm telling you to do, I'm doing too. I hope that it's going up. We'll retest soon. But I'm not worried about my bone health really, because my T-score of -1.5 has been -1.5 since I was in my mid or early 20s, as far as I know. So do I need to wear an Osteoboost to improve my bone? Probably not. Do I need to take drugs? Of course not. So if your T-score is stable, or if it's headed in the right direction, do you need to add other things? No. So that's where this diagnosis around osteopenia is concerning to me, because really osteopenia isn't even a diagnosis. There's no ICD code for osteopenia, only osteoporosis. And that's why what they claim, and they talk about this on their website and in their talks, is that we're all aiming at osteoporosis and it's too late. And that's kind of true, except that the reason why most things hold an FDA approval for osteoporosis, because osteoporosis is the actual diagnosis of a T-score less than -2.5. There isn't an ICD code for osteopenia. So I'm curious what they got approval for. So anyway, a little bit of an aside there, because when I hear people talk about, we need to intervene and treat everybody with osteopenia, you have to be careful with that. So then moving on. Let's talk about what this device actually does. Now, I had to pull this a little bit from some of the other videos that I saw online about this device, but essentially what this thing is, this is a vibration device. It is obviously small. It's smaller than a whole body vibration device, and it's based off of Clinton Rubin's work. So I'll show you this study in a second, but the device is supposedly uses a 30 hertz, that's the frequency, and they claim to produce 0.6 Gs of acceleration. So that's the amount of acceleration that the device produces. And it's a little bit more than what the Merodyne, a whole body vibration plate, which is around 0.3 plus or minus. So it's a little bit more. My question is that enough? We know if you go back and look at the videos, and I'll link to those at the end here on Dr. Rubin's work and the Merodyne, that no other authors have been able to reproduce the potential improvements that you see in bone mineral density with those devices other than Dr. Rubin as an author. So my concern is that is this device using a technology that has not been able to be reproduced by anybody else at 0.3 Gs? Is maybe 0.6 is enough? But we know that the power plate device or similar devices are going to be around 2 to 3 Gs. So a significantly higher amount of acceleration. So we can dig into that with the research, but let me just show you first. And so when you pull this study up, it's one of several studies that Dr. Rubin has published, but this one specifically just talks about the benefits and potential risks of vibration. So this is what they're basing, it seems like, what they're basing their technology on is this, ultra low displacement, G's around 0.6 of acceleration and 30 hertz, which is the sweet spot when it comes to vibration, according to lots and lots of literature. Okay, so they say on their website that there are multiple NIH-funded studies that are published. Now, this is a little bit challenging for me because we had a really hard time finding these. The NTX study that they talk about, and they do share one statistic, is kind of published. It is not published in a medical journal. It is likely, therefore, not peer-reviewed. But it's called Effects of Localized Vibration Therapy on Bone Remodeling Biomarkers in Postmenopausal Women. So it is a study, just not a peer-reviewed published study. So this is a pilot study, and they clearly say it as such. It's done at the University of Nebraska Medical Center, and they enrolled women within 6 years of menopause, and they excluded those having osteoporosis or those at high fracture risk or those over 300 pounds. They also excluded individuals who were using interventions that would affect the endocrine system. I think that probably means HRT. So this is kind of an interesting group. So you are using an early postmenopausal group. They're within that first 6 years. This is the group that's going to have the highest bone breakdown naturally. So we measure CTX, they're measuring NTX, the urine version, and that group is going to have really high levels of NTX. So this is kind of a smart design. If you wanted to see the impact on NTX, this is the group you should utilize because they're going to have the highest NTX and they're not on estrogen, so they're going to see the more rapid withdrawal of estrogen. They're going to see that rapid withdrawal of estrogen, and they're going to have relatively high CTX. Okay, so only 17 individuals completed this study, but again, it's a pilot study, so that's okay. They compared the vibration device to a sham device. Everybody did the sham device first because otherwise they would have known what the vibration device feels like. And as soon as they wore the vibration device, they clearly knew that the other device was a sham device. So, it's placebo controlled kind of, right? It's sham controlled, but it's clearly, you can clearly tell which one's the sham. So how effective is that? I don't know what else they would do though. So then they did biomarkers, including bone alk-phos, which is a biomarker of bone building, and then NTX, which is a biomarker of bone breakdown. Now there was no significant change in bone alk-phos. So it did not appear to increase osteoblast function according to that biomarker, but there was a decrease in NTX that was statistically significant. So basically their conclusion was NTX decreases, and that indicates that the inhibitory effect on bone resorption is great. So, okay, that's kind of cool. But my question is, what does that actually mean clinically? And we also know the reason why we do CTX over NTX is that NTX can swing wildly. In fact, it is 50% higher in the morning than it is in the afternoon. It's reduced by exercise. It's reduced by walking. So my question is, when did they test before the device? Was it in the morning? Did they then test after they wore the device, or was it just after walking at all? Was it the vibration? Was it the walking? So there's a lot of variables in here that are kind of concerning. So it's cool to see that it went down, but I want to know more information. I'd love to see a more tightly controlled study, or at least just tell me, when did you actually collect the samples, and were all of those other things controlled for? Okay, so then we get into the next study. So this third article that I want to talk about, this was actually, again, not I don't know that it was peer-reviewed, but it was not a full article published in a peer-reviewed journal. This is an abstract that was presented in 2023, and then it was published in October 2023. But again, it's not the whole article, it's just the abstract from the presentation. So let's take it for what it is. They used the Osteoboost device 5 times a week for 12 months. So we do have a nice long study. And then they looked at both compression strength and volumetric density of the L1 vertebrae on CT with the added element of finite element analysis, or FEA. And essentially, FEA and CT are very sensitive ways to look at bone. So this is cool to some extent. They had 126 women that were enrolled in the study, and they were on average around 60 to 62 years old. So that's pretty cool. When it comes to the analysis, though, the intent to treat, and if you've heard me talk about this, what that means is that not everybody used the device. And so intent to treat means we have to evaluate everybody as if they used the device the way we told them to, which wasn't true. And if you look at the intent to treat analysis, there was no difference. And that's not uncommon when there's a failure of individuals to use the device, if there's poor compliance of the device or a supplement or whatever it is. So in this type of study, it's not uncommon for them to do subgroup analysis. That always exposes us to some potential bias, but I think it's worth looking at here because this is where they make their claim. So in a subgroup analysis of women 50 to 60-year-olds, so again, now this is the younger group. This is the group that's going to have the most because of estrogen withdrawal, like they're going through menopause in that first 10 years, they're going to have the highest level of NTX or CTX. They're going to have the most bone breakdown. So potentially the group that is most likely to benefit from this type of intervention. The sham group lost 3.4% of strength, and the intervention group lost 0.5% of strength. And this is on CT, and that was statistically significant. So that looks pretty compelling. If you then look at the group that had compliance of 3 times a week or more, then the sham group lost 2.84% of their, I believe this is strength as well, and the intervention group lost around, again, 0.5, which is also, again, going to be statistically significant. So in both of those groups, those that were compliant and those that were in the age of 50 to 60, there looks to be a significant reduction in bone loss, or at least bone strength loss, according to CT. The other biomarker that they measured, radiographic, is volumetric bone density, and it was better preserved in the intervention group than the sham group, but they still both lost bone. So I'm going to give you my thoughts on this study, but before I do, if you are having a hard time putting together your own bone health program, please consider joining our free masterclass. It is an opportunity for people to come in, hear how we put together a custom bone health program, and then we leave about 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. This is a really powerful opportunity. We do this on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, depending on our schedule. And we have had thousands and thousands of people come through this class. And we continue to hear so many great reviews about the opportunity to hear me go through this thing that we are doing with people and share all of the research that we are putting together for individuals. So if you haven't done it, do it. Go to the link in the description here on YouTube, or if you're listening to this on a podcast, go to optimalhumanhealth.com and you can find our link there. All right, so back to this study. So again, is this an awesome study? Well, I think it's a really good attempt to demonstrate some benefit. It is industry funded, so take that for what it is. It's not necessarily, that doesn't mean that we should exclude it. It just means that we need to understand there's potentially some bias in that funding. I still don't know that it's peer reviewed. I couldn't tell by looking at the journal if they would peer review an abstract like that. The other challenge I have with the outcome metrics, their primary endpoints, is that CT is very sensitive to change. So we don't really know what that type of preservation of bone strength and volumetric bone means when it comes to T-score on DEXA. Not that I love that either, but that's what we're used to talking about. So it's hard to compare apples to apples what that means. Is it clinically relevant or significant? It's really hard to know. The other challenge here is that patients are still losing bone. They're just losing less bone. So they weren't as clear in this study about who was left out. Were there other, what were their exclusions? Did they exclude people with supplements, not with supplements? What were they taking? So there's just because it's not a full paper, we don't know. So there's just a lot of questions that I have around this study. It looks like in general, people are losing less bone, which is good. But is this really a powerful enough tool to justify the potential cost? Of course, we don't know what that is yet. So in my attempt to find more research on this particular device, I did also run across the CEO of the company on YouTube discussing the product. And I actually enjoyed listening to her talk about the problem because she is someone and she talks about this in her talk, from a medical background, but clearly she's in the business space. And so you can hear her excitement around helping people with osteoporosis, and I think that's great. But when I hear her talk about it, my fear is that they're really leveraging the same big pharma trap of T-score around talking about the potential to treat people with osteopenia and osteoporosis. Again, this population of over 50 million people with a device that may help slow down bone loss, but isn't actually reversing bone loss and changing the direction of that curve. So when I hear her talk about, the things that don't work, I disagree to some extent because she says that lifestyle doesn't change it. She says that diet doesn't change it. Supplements don't change it. And clearly we know that none of that's true. So I'm concerned that they've sort of missed some of the important potential things that can go along with this device if they were to create a program around it. But also one of the things that she says that whole body vibration itself isn't effective. And that's not true either. And if you go back and look at my series of talks on this, we have multiple videos on it. And if you look at the conclusion of the series of 3, you can see that there's clearly data that says that whole body vibration, outside of the data from Dr. Rubin, but whole body vibration does show that it can reverse osteoporosis. It can improve bone mineral density independently. The compliance rates are just as high on a whole body vibration program that is 10 minutes a day, 5 days a week, as this device for 30 minutes a day. So the big advantage that this device may have is that it's less expensive than, say, a power plate. That's true. It may be covered by insurance, which is also kind of cool, but it's not as good. And so I definitely believe that there's more evidence for using a whole body vibration plate like those from Power Plate. I like the concept of this device. I like the purpose of this device, but my challenge is that overall, it kind of violates the principles of how we improve bone health. It eliminates gravity, which you get on a whole body vibration device. It isn't as strong as what we know we need. We know that we need to hit those 2 to 3 Gs of acceleration to actually create the stimulus for bone growth. That's why I think nobody else can reproduce the research by Rubin Clinton. Is there a role for this device? I think it is kind of cool that it can potentially slow down bone loss. I just want to see more studies. If this is a device that we can get to people that don't have resources to have, a high quality vibration plate, then that's great. If people have the ability to stand and they have the ability to use this device and they don't have the capacity to do other things, is there a role for this device? I think sure, but we'd have to clearly understand what this is. When can it be utilized? I wouldn't want to pin all my hopes on this because, again, in the studies that we have, patients are still losing bone. So for me, I question how beneficial this is going to be. I definitely want to see more information. If you like this type of topic, definitely take a look at my conclusion video on whole body vibration. We also have another video for you to consider, which would be our top 3 supplements in osteoporosis, which is a really common question that people have. And you can check out both of those here. Thanks so much for your attention. I'll see you in the next video.